Hi guys, my name is Emily. Today is September 28th. Today I'm going to be sharing with you 5 gateway books. Books that will get you into my favorite genre, the fantasy genre, and I'm going to explain why. So I have picked 5 books in sort of different age groups that would target maybe different readers. So I'm going to start with children's literature. Ava Ibbetson's The Secret of Platform 13. This predates Harry Potter. The idea of traveling to a secret world in the London Underground, sort of what you see with Platform 9 3/4 in King's Cross Station. Platform 13 is also in King's Cross Station. So this tells the story of nurses who come out of the fantasy world on a special day, and they're walking around London with the heir to the magical kingdom. A woman who is desperate for a child steals the baby, and they don't really notice as they're rushing to get back to the platform, and the platform seals, and it's too late, and the platform only opens every so often. So many years later, the king and queen, who are devastated that they've lost their son, have put together this team of people that go through the platform to try and rescue their son. It's magical, it's funny, it's beautifully written, and this is one of the fantasy books that I read as a kid before Harry Potter. Like, I feel like it would be fairly easy to include Harry Potter on this list as a gateway to fantasy. I tried to avoid that, but picked something that I read in the sort of Harry Potter book 1, book 2 time in my life that really fostered my love for fantasy literature. So I would highly recommend that you check out Secrets of Platform 13. It's a fun read, and it's a fun way to get children involved in fantasy literature. The next book and book series that really cemented my love for fantasy literature is Tamora Pierce's Song of the Lioness series, specifically Alanna the First Adventure. I read this book so many times as a kid, like my copy's falling apart. I own a second copy of this because this one's just too fragile. I fell in love with the magic, the sort of medieval atmosphere, Alanna's fiery character. I loved the quests that happen over the series. They're fairly interesting in terms of their representation of gender, which is always great for young people. I then read through the rest of Tamora Pierce's series that were out at the time. Like, I devoured her body of works when I was about 9. I was given this for my birthday and then just flew through the rest of her works that were published. I mean, you can start with any of these 3. So this one focuses on a girl who has wild magic, so she can talk to and heal animals, and this one focuses on a girl without a magical gift who is openly trying for knighthood. After Alanna disguised her sex and earned her shield, King Jonathan decided that anyone should be able to try for knighthood. Kell is actually the person who does that. So I mean, you can read them out of order if you want. Like, if one story appeals more to you, like if you're more into animals, start with Dane. If you're more into like the magic, more classic fantasy adventure, I guess I would start with Alanna. If you're more into sort of political, feminist, I'd say this is the most feminist out of her fantasy series, just in terms of questioning of gender and class, but all of them are great. Of course, obviously I would recommend that you read them in sequential order, so that you start with Alanna, then move on to Dane, then to Kell, just because that's the publication order. They share a world, so stuff that happens in Alanna is referred to in the Immortals, stuff that happens in the Immortals is referred to in Protective of the Small. So I mean, ideally you read them in publication order, but they also work as a nice gateway into Tamora Pierce's world and into sort of the younger end of YA fantasy really well. The next book that's kind of sort of in that vein, but I guess for a little bit older readers, this gets you more into classic fantasy while still being kind of accessible, I guess, and that would be The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. So this sets up the Lord of the Rings world that you see. It's shorter, it's a quicker read. It still has the beautiful language and characters and world building that you see in Lord of the Rings, but it's not as dense. Like, as an adult reader, I find The Lord of the Rings dense. It's sort of a genre staple, so I've read them and I'm rereading them. If you kind of want a taste of Tolkien's world, because Tolkien has influenced so many writers since then, I feel like The Hobbit is a nice place to kind of familiarize yourself with his world, with the fantasy stuff as an older reader. So if you're maybe in high school, this might be a place to test out fantasy and see if you want to go the route of the Lord of the Rings, because I think jumping into the Lord of the Rings, if you're not prepared for that kind of density, is going to suck. I mean, that was my experience with it. So I think this is a good way into the classic fantasy with The Hobbit, because much of contemporary fantasy is very derivative. Like, I feel like Tamora Pierce is maybe a 9 to 12-year-old kind of series. I mean, obviously you can enjoy it as adults, but I feel like this is more for older teens if you want to get into fantasy. Speaking of derivative texts, there is the Elfstones of Shannara by Terry Brooks. Now this is part of a huge series. The majority of Brooks' early works are very derivative, very Lord of the Rings inspired. So it's like Lord of the Rings light, if you kind of want the Lord of the Ringsy feel, but you're not quite ready to invest in the Lord of the Rings because it's so fucking dense. It's such a time commitment to do the Lord of the Rings. It's a fun place to start, and there is a TV adaptation for it that's just batshit crazy, which is kind of a fun watch if you're not taking it seriously. So I mean, this might be a place to kind of get the feel of fantasy because it's borrowing heavily from Lord of the Rings for a lot of its world building elements. I don't know if I would have liked the Elfstones as a kid. I could see myself also not liking it just because it's also kind of longer and a little bit dense. But I feel like teens to adults would probably also enjoy the Elfstones of Shannara. The last book, obviously it's appropriate for readers of all ages, but I think this would really appeal to the adult audience, and that is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. The downside to recommending this is that you have to wait for the third book. We've all been waiting for the third book for like a million years. A friend of mine went to a Comic-Con conference thing where Rothfuss was at, and apparently he is painstakingly editing these things. When he submitted the trilogy for publication, all 3 were written, and he's since been editing like crazy. He's searching for perfection. So I mean, the downside to recommending this is that it's unfinished, but the plus side is that it's a very rich world. The magic system is really cool. I feel like it would appeal to a lot of older readers in terms of content. I love the characters. I think the characters are really interesting and nuanced. It's huge, but it reads really quickly. As adults, we have less time to do things like read, so having a fast-paced book where, even though it's huge, you move through it quickly can feel really rewarding. So with the writing style coupled with the world building, I think this is a great place to start if you're an adult that wants to get into fantasy. Obviously also, I think this works well for younger people. So those are the 5 books that I would recommend to get into the fantasy genre. If you are looking to get into the fantasy genre, let me know in the comments down below. What is the book that got you into your favorite genre? Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye!